Hello, hello there, visionaries. I am back with another deep dive with a really amazing CEO of the Condor approach, which is a psychedelic approach to integrating and utilizing psychedelics to really uplevel your whole person, your human, your how you see life. And they have a fantastic way of building community and creating safe spaces for people. And I'm just so excited to be sitting down here and chatting with you, Kole Whitty. Welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here. It's all my favorite topics, entrepreneurship, psychedelics. I mean, what else is there?
I know, right? That's what I was like, just share with you, all right, as we've got in, as I'm doing these interviews. And I hope as you listening in that you are really catching all of the whole series because the conversation I've been having and the cool people that have been showing up for this has been really, really fun. And it just reminds me so much of entrepreneurship, the tapestry that we have. It attracts all the weirdos, all the crazies, all the most brilliant, the smartest, the coolest people that I know. And I say weirdos, with so much affection and acknowledgement because, that's pretty much how I see myself. The ones standing out. We're oftentimes the black sheep, society and families, and somehow, right, really bring all of us, our being and our brilliance to this thing called entrepreneurship. So with that said, let's just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to creating the business that you have now.
It's one of those that it's always where do I start kind of things, right? Because it's like, pick a year, because the beauty of entrepreneurship is how, when you look back at all your past jobs, you see how each one of them gave you a skill set or an experience or a perspective that informs how you either lead or how you create or what you don't do or whatever. And so if I was going to drop into that right now, the context I feel that would be useful for people listening is to know that, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I remember being in the environment that I just didn't seem to fit. And people liked to make that abundantly clear that I was too much while also being not enough. And I'm sure anyone listening has felt some part of that at some point where it's my energy's too big, my voice is too loud, but what I'm doing is not enough, and my grades weren't good enough, and I wasn't showing up enough or whatever. And so it was this consistent internal battle of not wanting to contract and do nothing and then wanting to rebel at the same time. And it was just always really confusing, to be honest. And I didn't really find that the authority figures in my life. I have incredible parents. I don't know that my parents were equipped for not only how I am, because they're cool with who I am, but the how was tricky during the teens. By the time I was a teenager, I'd had childhood experiences that were traumatizing for me, that then I was an at-risk youth, got kicked out of 3 different high schools, dropped out of school, got a GED, didn't go to college. And so there really wasn't many other options but entrepreneurship, to be honest with you, which is the gift, because I couldn't apply for jobs on paper. I had to learn how to build relationships and communication. I had to learn how to sound intelligent and that I knew what I was doing, because on paper I couldn't prove it. And so my dad used to say, "You're so full of crap, your eyes are brown." I've always had a gift of communication, but that's really an adaptation of trauma that it was like, well, I got to get a skill. So I was fortunate enough to get into that. That's one of my adaptations, is that I learned to communicate. But by the time I got into my early 20s, that at-risk youth situation really caught up to me. At 17, I ended up in a coma from a drug overdose that flipped that at-risk to, oh man, I've got to find a purpose and I got to figure out something else. This path's not working. Then I became a motivational speaker, traveled all over the world, Montel Williams, all these talk shows. But I was trying to make up for everything I wasn't. I knew I wanted to help people, but really I was being driven by shame, not inspiration. I was being driven by desperation. Like, if I don't make up for this person I'm not or who I should be, then I'm going to go, to hell or whatever, according to my upbringing. And so as that progressed, truth is, I'm doing the work I always knew I was meant to do in really helping people, supporting people, and illuminating their life force and what they're meant to do. The difference is I had a lot of work to do to shift the position where I wasn't driven by guilt and shame, but I was driven by inspiration and inspiring others to do the same versus trying to make up for who they think they're not. And that's what opened up the world of psychedelics in a healing capacity. And after, 10-ish years of doing my own work, I've been in the work for 15. I'm a few years in now to just education. And it's my first time really running a business. The past ones now, in retrospect, I was like, oh, that was cute. I thought I was working on a business. Now I'm working in a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I am grateful for my work in psychedelics and learning how to release some control, because entrepreneurship is a medicine. So people say plant medicine and for healing. Entrepreneurship is stronger than ayahuasca. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm going to use that line for sure, because I say, all the time that entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey. It's a personal growth journey, and it's not for the faint of heart. And it takes this level of resilience, right, to just get through it. And what an amazing journey you've been on. So powerful.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I say it's like Murphy's Law. Everything that could happen did. That was in positive ways and less desirable ways, but it increased my capacity to feel. Like I truly think that's the gift that stepping into entrepreneurship now is I've learned what really matters to me. Mm-hmm. And it's not money. And yet at the same time, knowing that I actually could have everything my heart desires, because there was one moment, one of my business coaches actually said to me, look, if you get to the point where you think money doesn't buy happiness, it's because you haven't given enough away. And if you get too much, I'll sit down with you and help you decide what number would be correct for you, and you can give it all away until you're there. And I was like, that feels totally different in my body than me having more money is selfish or too much, or, oh, well, I just need enough. And that was a huge trap for me in initially like creating a business that I wanted to be contribution driven. And it took being surrounded and investing in coaches that were honest enough with me to say, if you limit the financial abundance you're willing to accept, you're limiting the impact you can make. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That is like the big light bulb moment. And, I'm definitely on a mission of transferring wealth into the hands of entrepreneurs that are changing the world and humanity. To me, there is like so many of my clients, when they come to me, they have that fear of, oh my God, like I'm making all this money and it's not about the money. I have so much more that I want to do in my world. And I'm like, I get that, but money is just energy. It's just a contribution. It's just a way of changing energy with the universe for your contribution to the world. And what if you had a bunch of wealth? We know you're not going to be selfish with it. You're not greedy. You're going to turn around and give it away and contribute to the world in an even bigger way. What is a better use of finances finding their way into your hands, right? Like that piece is a pivotal moment for many of us when we realize that giving back and the change that we really can contribute and the impact that we can really make when we have the abundance, and it's really hard to be generous when you are struggling to survive yourself.
Well, you can't be generous from that place, right? And this is something that, we work with a lot of coaches and medicine carriers and facilitators. And one of the most common things that I tell them at our live events is that when you don't charge anything or you don't charge enough, so you're still driving Uber Eats on the weekend or whatever, you're actually giving a discounted service to the person. And I believe every person deserves to have the same service as someone that paid $10,000 as can pay nothing. And when you don't come up with a clear intentional plan for your business of how do I contribute and in what ways, then what ends up happening is everybody starves because you're giving budget care. It's like giving someone a saltine cracker when they're starving. Is it better than nothing? Sure. But is it actually going to move the dial in their life? Not really. And so it's taking that pull back and saying, what is my intention with a business? And so many are afraid of even calling it a business because they get shamed from external sources or feel like they shouldn't be charging. And, that was something that I had to work through too. But ultimately, you don't have to charge the people that don't have that resource. There's other people that you can charge with resources that become a trickle down for those that don't have it, so that it's creating an ecosystem of support. And that's part of the thing is you have to remove yourself from the people you've judged that had money to say, well, them or the top 1%, I just don't want to be like them. Or I don't want the community to think I'm like them. So I'm going to stay small and just make enough versus get radically honest with yourself. Say, what is my intention here? What do I want to know or do? Who do I want to be? What do I want to understand? And then build your intentions, your mission, your values into a business that supports what you want. Because honestly, so many people in the psychedelic space talk about reciprocity models, but they're doing it like, 10% of proceeds. Mm-hmm. None of us know what we're freaking doing in entrepreneurship, are not great at money for quite a while till you have to learn that skill. And there's not enough afterwards for 10% to do anything for anyone. It's like, we donated $100 this month to this organization. And not that that's bad, but I recognized if we were going to make an impact in the whole industry, then we needed to be contributing thousands of dollars at a time to organizations for it to actually help them. Otherwise, same thing. It's not, they need to build websites, or they need to pay for a lawyer, or they need other ways for their nonprofits or not-for-profit organizations to function. Mm-hmm. And guess what all of them need? Money. So I was like, instead of me helping so many people for free, if I make more money, I can donate to the groups that need money who are contributing, so that they don't have to have second, third jobs, that they can focus on who they serve.
So powerfully stated. Like one of my clients, Elaine Kalila with Priestess Press, and she has a community of over 80,000 people. And she was able to triple her scholarships to her own programs, right? When she started to hitting the bigger numbers in her business. And that was a huge motivational factor of actually making more, was to be able to contribute even more back. Mm-hmm. Or like another one of my clients, Melissa Seaman from Channel Your Genius, like she decided to invest to build a whole retreat center. She has over 20 plus acres up in the California Rockies, Nevada City, and just created this amazing, like it's a natural pool, and like she has a beautiful sweat lodge and, all of these circles on her land, and she can now hold retreats there. So the money that comes in can be funneled out in these profound ways of really giving back to the community. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the piece that we really need to lean into when we're up against these upper limits. So that's super powerful. So what has been one of the steepest learning curves on your own entrepreneurial journey?
Steepest. No one told me that when you start to make more money, money is like a muscle. And I hear in the coaching space, which is a not functional saying, you need to increase your rates. But for me, it's like increase the weights. So if you're at the gym and you want to be an Olympic lifter, or you want to be able to lift heavy, you don't go in and tell someone to double the weights, right? It's an incremental growth because it requires different muscles and smaller muscles that you don't know about to build the bigger muscles. And for me, money is that way. That when I started to go from charging $250 for a session with a client to I've charged as much as $50,000, really $60,000 for a 1-day, 24-hour period with a client. What happens is if you actually grow too fast, your unconscious traumas and beliefs will show and rear their ugly head. And it is a hard lesson to learn. The first time I charged $20,000 for something, now I already knew I had the skills. I knew that. I've worked with big companies. I've worked with, just not in the psychedelic space, right? And for some reason, that doesn't always translate in your belief system, because in this space, so much of it around spirituality should be exclusive of money, which to me, divine is all things. So we can't be separate from spirituality, right? And so in the evolution of learning that skill, the hardest thing to learn was how to inventory, track, and care for my money. Because what I was doing is I wasn't treating money the same way I had everything else. I didn't have the same gratitude practice. I didn't have the same appreciation. And so the hardest thing to learn was that I was not cohesive in who I was with how I worked with money. Because with my house and with people and with how I contribute and show up, there was so much intentionality. And with money, there wasn't. And so that showed up as not understanding contracts and chargebacks, because I'm rolling from my heart. We're all just, we're all doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And then having the harsh reality of there are people that will not be satisfied with a service. And if you don't have a clear agreement and they do a chargeback, that can actually collapse our entire business and who and how we serve. And so those were all just the different ways that showed up. Or to suddenly have a big expense because we started doing bigger retreats. where all of a sudden I've got a $20,000 bill, but I wasn't paying attention to all of the incurring of expenses as we hired more team and gave people more jobs. And Spirit will clearly care for us if we're doing all this good. No, you still have to take radical responsibility for all of the parts and pieces. And so the money parts were the hardest things to learn, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I have laid on the floor of this office, cried, felt sorry for myself, said, why am I even doing this? Let it wash over me, and then got back in my chair and back to work because I know what I'm here to do. It's just nobody talks about that. They talk about the sexy parts of contribution, and you get to make donations and you get to help people. And that's actually one of the things that I've been committed to changing, both with the people that we work with, that, facilitators, whatever. I've gone into trainings and slapped a stack of overdraft fees onto the table and said, look, I want to be so transparent with y'all so that when you're creating things that this can be part of it. So if, do the work now, because as you grow, it's only going to magnify the issues that are already there. And if you don't know how to manage money, when you get more of it, you're going to have more things you don't know how to understand how to manage, but you dig a much bigger hole much faster.
Yeah, right. Yes, absolutely. Such a powerful lesson. And I always say that when I increase my rates, I'm always looking I want to increase them enough that it gives me a little bit of oops, yes. I have to now show up in a bigger way. And because, there's a big difference from somebody who's going to pay $5,000 or somebody who's paying $55,000 and how they show up and the level of deliverability and service that you need to be able to provide for a higher dollar amount. And so it allows me to line up, I have to show up. I have to up level how I'm showing up. But I think what you're really speaking to is this piece about our mindset. And how our mindset and how we hold things, and we may not even be aware of it, right? And I think this is where radical responsibility really comes in running our own businesses and being entrepreneurs, is that how we show up instantly, there's this instant feedback. And we're joking about this whole entrepreneurship piece. It's not for the faint of heart, but it is a spiritual growth process because there's this instant feedback when we show up in an incongruent way in our businesses, where these things starts happening. And it's very easy to feel victimized. I definitely felt victimized at times when things starts falling apart. One of my steepest learning curve has been all around team and building relationship with team and having a good team and being a good leader to my team and providing an environment where they can actually succeed in my business. And that took a lot of responsibility because, of course, like so many entrepreneurs, I couldn't find the right people, which is the most ridiculous thing because every single person that comes into your business actually wants to succeed in your business, right? But that's our words. Oh, I can't find good people. People are scammers. People don't show up.
Nobody wants to work. Yeah.
Nobody wants to work. All of these things, which these are ways that I see that victimhood shows up. And we don't think of ourselves as victims. We're building a business. We're entrepreneurs. We're creating change. We are empowered leaders out in the community working with our clients. And then there's all these murky waters, right, behind the scenes of our businesses where all of these incongruences in who we are holding ourselves and who we are being in the world are showing up. And those are the leaks, right? Those are the energetic leaks and the profit leaks and the things that would really sink to ship if we don't tend to these pieces. So thank you so much for bringing light to this piece around money and how we hold it and how we show up and deceives that we create. I cannot tell you how many times I step into multi-six or even multi-seven-figure businesses where the owner is struggling to make ends meet, struggling to make payroll, not able to pay themselves, running on a 5% profit margin barely, or putting money into the business. And it's all because of this capacity to be able to hold the money that is flowing their way and being a good steward as it is showing up in their business.
Yes.
So incredibly powerful. And how do you navigate setbacks in the business? So if this misalignment that you were speaking about showing up as chargebacks, which is incredibly painful for businesses. One, they just pull money right out of your account and you have to fight it until you get that money back, right? So that's number one. So it's this sense
Which
of like,
takes
oh,
months. Like it's not, even if you have
right.
contracts, it's not an immediate return. They pull it and then they figure it out, which is
Right. And then you have to
devastating.
fight it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're waiting for that money to potentially come back into your account. And meanwhile, you still have to make payroll. You still have
That's
to pay your
right.
bills. You still have a function in the business. Right. And on top of that, it's a huge ding to your credit report and your merchant account for your business when you have just one chargeback, much less if you have a string of it.
Totally.
So when those kind of things happen to you, like, how do you navigate that? Like, how do you walk us through kind of how you navigate those things and maybe how you think your way through them?
You know, I'm not here to condone any illegal or illicit use of any substances. I will say that all of the internal self-work I've done over the years put me in a position to understand that it can only affect me when I believe it has something to do with me as a person versus a lack of education or a lack of understanding, and that it was skills I could learn. And a lot of what I recognized where there was skills I needed to learn, and I had to learn them through that thing. Sometimes it was a reflection of my belief system, and sometimes it's because I didn't know. As you grow, sometimes you've already jumped out of the plane with the parachute, and the parachute is not even constructed yet. And so it was a combination of, what is my daily self-care look like? What are my non-negotiables for my mental health, for my physical health? Tracking, having an inventory of my life, understanding how to prioritize, understanding permanent delegation or how to hire people to take on tasks and stay that way. How to hire, like you said, in general, so that for events, it's people that really understand the mission and the purpose and how they can be successful, and where their freedom to create is, and where you need them to be on certain metrics. So for me, I had to reach a level of self-awareness on a daily basis of what way are we sailing the ship? What are the check-ins? And I had to hire business coaches, people that had already learned these, because there was so much I didn't know that was costing me a lot of money to not know. And that's part of it too, is you reach a point that you cannot keep going and not suffer, or you'll at least suffer a whole lot less if you have someone on your side saying, hey, do you have these kind of agreements in order? Because here's what can happen. Because it cost me tens of thousands of dollars to learn some lessons when I was refusing to pay for a business coach for $20,000 or $40,000. And in retrospect, it would have saved me so much of my health, mentally, spiritually, physically, to have found a way to invest in someone before the suffering occurred. And I think that's part of the lesson too, is someone's already done a good chunk of what you're trying to do, find them, and then ask what they've done. And I will only hire someone that is modeling a whole life that I would be willing to live. I might change some things, right? But if they have a successful business, but the way that they treat their team is not in alignment with how I want to treat my team, then they're not my coach for business. I want someone that has a more integrated, healthy approach to life, because I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe that at different times I find an integration of my life that works for me. And business and my personal life are not separate. A lot of people talk about separate. Mine's not separate. And my husband is my business partner. We talk about work all the time, but we love it. We love what we do. And we have rules not talking about money in bed. Like that's the one thing, like no talking about a bill or someone that needs to pay or someone that didn't pay in bed, because it can disrupt our sleep. But besides that, it was creating a process. What are the terms of engagement for our business and for our life? And having a check-in. Are we living in alignment to what we believe, but without the business, the people that we desire to be? What does that alignment look like? And having a system to check in. And part of what we run, the Condor approach, is also a daily journaling workbook. Though we say it's for psychedelic experiences, it's for life integration. So it's body mapping. What's going on in my body? Because I'm sure you've seen this too, especially with 7-figure, 8-figure coaches or entrepreneurs who hustled so hard into that success that their body and their health crashes, and they have to use their wealth to get their health back when they can't work anymore. And they were the bottleneck to the business, to where the whole thing shuts down until they figure out their health. So I knew what I didn't want to do before I started building a business. I watched what was dysfunctional. And so then it was like, okay, so what do I need to know, do, be, or understand to stay in alignment? What kind of body work? What kind of lifestyle do I need to live in? What does that look like? What are my monthly expenses that are kind of like my critical number? Like I need to hit this to cover everything. Then what's at this point, all my self-care stays in tactic. And what's the level above that where there's an abundance to do more with it than I want? But we pay our contributions first. And I don't know any other business that I've met that does. We said, how much do we want to give and why? And we pay that first like it's a bill. Now, I don't know if that's always been the best decision because there's times we have gone without, but that was what was important to us, is to keep our commitment because we see it as a very spiritual mission that we're on, a very contribution driven. And so our contribution happens first. And in our first 2 years of business, we donated over $500,000 between scholarships and money and helping with COVID. A lot of our soul family in Peru didn't have any tourism, so they needed support. And so we were helping them sell wares and stuff like that. And so it was, what is the kind of like bumpers of your bowling alley so that you can create radical self-responsibility for yourself and then surround yourself with people to help remind you of who you are, or if they see that you're behaving outside of what you say you want or who you want to be. And then we have coaches to help us so that we're all clear in the mission. And I think that that's the biggest thing that gets in the way for entrepreneurs is they haven't gotten radically clear in their mission. And I'm not talking about who you help. Why? Why does this matter? Why is this important to you? Because that fuel is the most important life force energy for everything that I do. So in the moments I want to give up, in the moments when I'm literally laying in the rug on the floor of my office, not because I'm tired from overworking, but because sometimes it is freaking hard. And no one is going to, very few people, online especially, if you say being an entrepreneur is hard, they're like, oh, boo-hoo. You know what I mean? It's like the most privileged statement. You have food in your mouth. And so it can be a cold place to be sometimes if you don't surround yourself with community. So I really think that we call it a life team. Who are the people around you that believe in your vision, who support your mission, who know who you are in truth, who are your cheerleaders, and sometimes you pay for that to be coaches, and sometimes you're in a mastermind of other people that are there. But that piece is so important so that when your willpower fades or when you feel like your light is dimming, that you have other people there to kind of protect that light from blowing out.
So important. Yeah. You touched on so many important pieces. So I'm going to unpack a little bit just for our listeners too, to kind of really, really integrate these pieces that I'm really hearing. One is the integration between personal and business life. I think this is this compartmentalization that started to happening, to me, ultimately a trauma response. I believe trauma, it really is these pieces of breaking us apart and compartmentalizing ourselves. And wholeness and healing really is the same. So if we bring in the things to the whole, and so often in business, we build businesses that don't feel in alignment. Or so many times, I talk to multi-6 or multi-7-figure business owners, and they don't like their business anymore. They don't like the life they're leading anymore. They have a super successful business, but they feel like they must be more. It's not really what they excited about. It's not really what they expected it was going to look like when they got there. And I think that one piece that happened for so many business owners really comes from this unawareness of the compartmentalization that is happening. So we end up building a business that is actually not in alignment with our vision or our mission or who we really want to be in the world, or what actually gives us fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And so that piece that you spoke about, and I, for one, did not have the smarts that you had of noticing what was working and what's not working out in the world, and very intentionally building my first business. I did all the mistakes in my first business and totally crashed and burned, right? And then, of course, now this time around, being very intentional, and I did end up selling that business in 2016. So it ended up on a good note. But, building a business now with that hindsight has really helped me, right, to be very intentional. And you were brilliant enough to watch what was going on in the world and then take what you liked and cherry picked and decided, hey, there's a different way of doing this than what I'm seeing. So I think that's super powerful.
Yeah. I mean, even with that foresight, we'll say, it's like reading about a concept and applying it, right? Like, would you want a doctor who had only read about brain surgery and not performed it before? And so that's really how I still entered it, where I conceptually understood, because when I was facilitating full time, I was working with primarily, I would say, entrepreneurs in like the $2 to $7 million range were most of my clients, were mostly my clients. And so I'm watching them process their self-work, what drives them, the shame, the trauma. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my gosh, entrepreneurs are operating from the same trauma responses as the addicts I used to work with. This is just the socially acceptable version of what to be addicted to and what to drive for. But for the physical health of the organism, of the body, of the person, and the hurt was not better. It was just societally, if you're a functional human, that's acceptable, right? High performance, you are valuable. But you are a workhorse for something else, for a bigger system. So you are no less a slave to something as an addict who, because of their trauma and drama, has a substance they're trying to hide in or trying to not feel whatever pain is resonating inside of them. And so I had that foresight, but I have still filed bankruptcy. I have still had to, go through some of these shadow aspects, but that also gave me the confidence that no matter what happens, I'll figure it out. And that so much of what was shaking me up was my ideas of security. So future pacing myself. Yeah, but if I don't, then it's going to ruin my credit. Then I'm going to, whatever. That would affect my health, where overdraft fee. I'm with a credit union. The credit union is like $15. That would make me sick. And so it was interesting because when we went through one of our most challenging points, and this was the same point, I put a stack of overdraft fees on the table at one of our events a year ago. And I said, you all think that it's super sexy to charge what I'm charging, but you don't understand that a drop in the bucket is a drop out of the bucket. So whether it's $50 or $50,000, you have to do the work to not have your life impacted by the presence or absence of money. I'll say beyond, having enough food and shelter. We call that the poverty line. Mm-hmm. And so beyond that, it's the same suffering. And you may not feel bad for someone that has more, but when you start to recognize, I don't have the privilege of only feeling bad for myself. If money doesn't come in, I have whole families that rely on it. So it's not just poor, pitiful me, because the one that will go without first is me. The one who will not have groceries is me, because I will not tolerate other people who have put their trust in me to not be fed, clothed, and cared for to the best of my ability. So it's actually a greater pressure, plus your mission and your purpose, if that's what you're ascribing to and participating in. And so I had to learn to unhook from my body, from my nervous system, the external things like money, like security, because I would worry so much about the future that my body would feel the fear now, but it's not here. And it's not even a real, even credit score, I had to do work around my credit. And I had this moment where I said, but what difference does my credit make right now? If all cards are maxed out, my credit's down, what difference does it make? Nothing. I'm not trying to buy anything. Now, if I know we need to invest or buy something 6 months from now, then we need to clean that now. That's a priority. But the immediate now might be learning Facebook ads or hiring the next coach or whatever versus the future of the credit, right? And so it took not running from it anymore, because I had leaned into my life in every other way. I'm in my second marriage, so I'd been through divorce. I knew what I didn't want. I had all these, things there. I had leaned into relationships. I had leaned into my past traumas and experiences. I had leaned into my purpose and my path. I had to get really, really transparent with my money, where it was going, reconciling the money each week, getting a bookkeeper, cleaning up our taxes. We hadn't paid in 3 years, back in 2018. And when we looked at how little we made from 2013 to 2018, I didn't make more than $16,000 a year. I found other ways to figure it out. I had times of cleaning toilets at friends' houses, because then I could listen to a course I was in, or a podcast or a YouTube or whatever, and learn while I cleaned, right? So it takes this willingness of being so honest with yourself that if you don't have any money, it's nobody else's fault, because I survived on $1,000 a year at times because I had to be so mindful of every penny and how it was being utilized, to the point where until I really understood that, if I made more money, I just spent more money. So like you said, these multiple 6-figure, 7-figure coaches, if you're only surviving on a 5% margin of cash right now, if you get more money, guess what you're going to do? Spend more money. Because you're still operating from this old system or part of yourself that says, oh, let me spend it while it's here. But the reason that it's not going to be here is because you're spending it like that. So it's like you're just going to create what already exists.
And I don't know if you resonate with this, but I think that for me, like, there's a sense of worth that gets tied into money that I see a lot, where people have, if I don't make, like, their own self-worth get tied into making $50,000 a month, $100,000 a month, $200,000 a month. And it's like, it's a status symbol. Mm-hmm. And when we start tying our worth into money in this way, that's when these imbalances get really, really kind of like the roller coaster becomes really hard to navigate. And one of the things that I'm the biggest on is, have monthly recurring revenue. So I came from a brick and mortar business where I had a 100% commission-based business, and I was making monthly recurring revenue. When I sold it in 2016, 75% of my clients have been with me 7 years or longer and paying me, monthly recurring revenue. And so when I came into the online world and I stepped into the launch models and people doing these big launches, putting all the eggs in one basket, failing horribly, or people who made $150,000 launch in an event, but when they did the math at the back end, they were owing money because it just wasn't managing the money during the event. And so I started seeing all of this. I was like, I'm gonna create a monthly recurring revenue in my coaching business. And that's always been my thing in building evergreen monthly recurring revenue, so that I can take 6 months and focus on a piece of my business that needs to be developed and needs to be focused and needs to be built out for sustainability and long-term success without feeling like I'm going to completely go out of business if I do that, because I have a monthly recurring revenue. And so just these simple ways of how we utilize money to regulate our own nervous system and creating some stability both in our business and life. And like you said, most business owners that I know will take care of our team, we'll take care of our vendors, we take care of our people way ahead of us.
Which is literally the counterproductive thing to do too, is like you're putting others in front of before yourself, right? So you're putting as they say on the planes, you're not putting the mask on yourself first.
Right? And it's all of these pieces. So I feel like so much value in, thank you so much for sharing too, so vulnerably and really talking about this. I think it's incredibly valuable for our listeners to be tuning in and hearing these pieces.
Yeah. This is where, and I'm so grateful that you're having these types of conversations, because on the online space, when I see the expensive cars and the mansions, and look, people have seen me on private jets on Instagram, but I also mention that was a friend that paid for that. That was not me taking a plane. That was someone that gave me that gift. Right. And so here's what's crazy is to be surrounded by, I'm so grateful in my life that I have women to inspire me that are 7- and 8-figure coaches. One of my dearest friends, who was the first to inspire me that I could be a good person with money, makes $45 million a year. She is self-built. Right? This is her business. She's not the CEO anymore. She hired a new CEO, but it is still her business and what she created. And she was the first person that I met that I said, you mean money doesn't make you a bad person? It's who you are, just gets turned up. And if you're a contribution-based person and heart-focused, you're still that with more money. That changed everything for me. And what I wanted to see, what I really wanted to do different was to share more of the reality of all of it, where, I have been on private jets. Yes, I have been on beaches and penthouses and all of this stuff, but I'm also honest that I'm not the one that paid for those things, right? Because not only that, but that I could be in a penthouse 1 week and a week later in a, wherever, living in my car. I've done all of it. And I think that when we operate from that level of transparency, then people get to choose their own adventure of entrepreneurship more. Most people will not take the risks that I do. I don't have biological children. My husband's daughter's 32. Like, I don't have the same responsibilities and the same things. Like, if I ended up living in my car, I could. And I have. And so it's understanding, what are your thresholds for overwhelm? What does that cause you to do or not do? If the worst case scenario happened, what would you do? And so if someone has young children at home, putting all of, like you said, your eggs into a basket of a big launch is, I don't know many people who didn't have a health crash either when they were launching or right afterwards, because they got so burnt out. And then they did all that work on the front end. They do no back work on the back end of all these people that they captured their email list, and they didn't learn how to nurture and how to connect with people afterwards. So it's like, oh, if you didn't buy, I'm done with you. Or at least that's how it can feel to people, is that if they didn't buy, then you just move on from them. I've done it too. You know, I did a summit. I thought it would be a big launch. I had 6,000 people register in 2018. And that's before, you know, summits. It was the biggest one I'd ever seen. And I was the only person doing the front end, the back end, the tech, all of it. I had 26 total guests of women health experts. But the difference was, I created a body plan for my launch plan. My husband would cook the meals during the launch. He'd bring me my food. We knew what time meals were. I built in 2 massages a week. Like, that was part of the plan, because I knew what my body needed if it was going to be demanded that it do so much. And it goes back to that intentionality. I don't know if I'll ever do the big launch thing again. I thought it was not worth the trouble. Even if you would have added an extra 0 to the end of it, it still wouldn't have been worth it. When I like to just know how I serve, who I serve. Now I do live events. We do 4 events a year. That's not no work. And there's a launch sequence to it, but it repeats. So every time we do it, there's less I have to do. It's more we're improving what's there versus new product, new launch, new product, new launch, new product, new launch. So you've got this table of table of contents of courses that nobody is buying, because you're never getting past launch. So what's beyond launch? Have you seen that as well with people, where they keep creating new things
Absolutely.
and then they can't get anything on repeat?
Absolutely. All the time. I mean, this is probably one of the number one things that we do when I step into people's businesses is, you know, you have to simplify before you multiply. So all we do is helping people scale, right? And so the way we do it is not through marketing and sales. That works really well in the startup stages. But when you're really scaling, it's all about removing the capacity blocks. And we have to simplify before we multiply, or we're going to end up multiplying chaos. Right. And the whole thing starts falling apart. And most people scale, you know, get to 7 figures, you know, mostly on just white knuckle hustle culture. And this is the sure way to burnout. They try to scale on a business model that's really only suited for a startup. And they don't understand what needs to change in order to actually scale successfully. So really tapping into these pieces is so important. You have to build a sustainable model. And every model is not for everybody. This whole idea of contorting ourselves into somebody else's idea of success, of, you know, it's a mess, right? It becomes a mess when we think that we're signing up for somebody who has a way, this is how you need to be, this is what you need to do in order to be successful. And I just don't believe in that model at all. You know, we look at human design, we look at StrengthsFinder.
Yay! I love human design.
Yeah. We really look into, like, actually align a business model that fits for your vision, your mission, your purpose, and then how you actually co-create with the universe utilizing human design and the StrengthsFinder, so we can build it around your natural strengths and your unique wiring. It's not my model. Your model is going to look totally different. But yes, building in monthly recurring revenue, setting yourself up for sustainable growth and profitability. It's such a big piece of the puzzle that I think is not necessarily talked about a lot. So.
I love that you use human design. We use human design a lot for us, for our team, and for our customer base. Because if I know, like, even when someone does an intake to come to an event, we ask their human design. Because if I know I've got a room full of projectors, I have to invite them into the conversations a bit differently, or I can. And
Mm-hmm.
that has changed the way that we interact with everything. And even in how, if I'm supporting a facilitator, because I've actually done retreats and I've actually been a facilitator,
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to their human design and tell them, why are you doing night journeys when you're a projector? You are burning out and you can't keep doing these 12-hour ceremonies. That's why your body's so tired. That's why you're having liver and kidney issues. You're processing all this energy without the right support for your system. And
Yeah.
with one of our coaches or one of our medicine carriers, just by them changing to day ceremonies. So they started doing them at 9 a.m. and they used blackout curtains and, cover
Mm-hmm.
their eyes for their clients. That totally changed it because they were now in a more natural rhythm for their projector that loves to be in the space with people. But they were doing journeys at night because they felt like that's what you're supposed to do. That's how they were trained and taught by the shaman. And I'm like, that's fine. But for you, you're so tired. One, you're falling asleep at about 9 p.m. Now this person's journeying by themselves, which goes against what you say you want, which is to be fully present with them and for them. And it's by getting into that unique part, or when people will compare themselves to me. I'm like, I am a 4-motor generator. I am endless energy. I can work 16 hours. When I was facilitating, there were times we would do really deep couples work where we're trying to figure out if they're going to stay together or uncouple. And so I had points where it was 72 hours and we worked for 50 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'd sleep for a little bit, we're back in it. And then also knowing that then for people on my team, like with projectors, if we're going to get something done, we're going to co-work so they can plug into my batteries. We can be super efficient. Then they're going to need the next day off.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Right. All of these things, right? And and that's the piece of really fully integrating and really focusing on who we are actually being before we get into the doing and the having. So it's so powerful. And I just thank you so much for diving in here. I just loved our conversation. I could clearly just sit here and chat with you for the rest of the day, that's for sure. And I'm just curious, where can people find you and connect with you and the amazing work that you do in the world?
Of course. Instagram, I feel like is where I connect the most. It's the easiest to kind of manage just because Facebook gets super out of hand. So if people want to reach out directly, Instagram, it's Mr. Kole, or you can look up the Condor Approach, either one. I manage both of them. It's not bots. I hope someday it's bots, just at least so that I can filter some of the stuff, but it is actually me managing everything on that side. And then we're doing a Facebook group. It's a free Facebook group that we just talk about, again, the preparation, navigation, and integration, helping people really to get clear in who they are and how they want to explore through the psychedelic lens. But truthfully, it's about integrating with life. How do you get clear in who you are, what you want, so that you can get there? And you got to get radically honest. So that's kind of my favorite jam.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kole. It's been a pleasure connecting with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.